performance. Live?
I may have.
Making friends. Hi guys, welcome to the second 4 year in a row Mayoral Palooza. Who was here the first time? Okay, well I am so excited about this year, especially because we're live streaming, so we have a big audience at home. So let's give them a shout out, a vocal shout out to all of our folks who are at home for all kinds of different reasons. There's a bunch of people I want to thank who made this happen. So we have our sponsors who came together in all of our different issue areas and said, we want to be a part of this event. So of course this event is All in Denver's event, and we have great people who've come to the table. Colorado Coalition for the Homeless, their team worked so hard on this. Of course, we have Beverly and Mo Better Green. I hope you guys, if you don't know her, don't know their incredible work, please find her, reach out to her, get one of those amazing buttons outside. We, of course, have Warm Cookies of the Revolution. And then we have Youth on Record, who is represented here. So we have a really great cross-section of folks. I'm Jamie Duffy. I am the co-founder of All in Denver and have been a part of this work for about 7 years. I'm also the longtime executive director of Youth on Record, and I sit on Denver's Cultural Affairs Commission. I'm also a fifth-generation Coloradan, and my Colorado claim to fame is that my great-grandpa started the cherry cricket and the, yep, that was his bar, and the St. Patrick's Day Parade. So, long time history here. I'm Denver ride or die, and I'm also a little bit of a political nerd. But part of the reason I get excited about an event like this is because we really want to make politics, elections, our candidates accessible. You know, there's a lot of us who have backgrounds in politics. There's a lot of us for whom this is our very first political event. And we want to make sure that we're welcoming you into this space because this is your space. One of these two people is going to be our mayor. And at the end of the day, we're going to have to work together, and they work for all of us. So I'm really excited for those who are tuning in, those who are here in person. We have a great team who put this together, so I want to thank Kevin, his entire team at Denver Film Society for welcoming us into this beautiful space. Really want to thank DJ Stevie. He's available to book. He's amazing. Here he is in the corner. Want to thank Lex with Colorado Coalition for the Homeless, our Palooza Planning Committee, and then of course, we couldn't do this without our amazing event coordinator, Michelle Baldwin, who is incredible to work with. So big round of applause for everybody who put this on, who was working hard to do this. Again, we started Mayoral Palooza so that we could welcome more people into the political arena. That's also why we started All in Denver. So I really encourage all of you to potentially sign up for a membership. We have a sliding scale membership starting at $10 a year, really making sure that's accessible to everybody. And today is really about increasing humanity around politics. That leads me to Erin from Buntport Theater, who is going to be our moderator today. We asked her 4 years ago. She was unavailable. We are so excited she's with us today. I've never seen an event, a meeting, a community gathering that Erin wasn't at, that there wasn't joy, laughter, storytelling, and humanity. So please help me welcome her, and we will kick it off.
Thank you so much. Welcome, everybody. As Jamie said, I am Erin Rollman. My day job is at Buntport Theater, where I make up silly things for a living. So I'm obviously very qualified for this political event. The imposter syndrome is flowing through me, and we'll get through it together.
You and me both.
Okay, good. All right. So welcome. This event is hopefully a little bit different. A different way to get to know your candidates for mayor. We have sort of avoided some of the usual questions because it's really easy to find out their positions on the big ticket issues when you go to their websites or when you watch other events. This is sort of designed to learn more about their working style. We'll consider it a job interview, but I'm not going to ask you about your strengths and weaknesses. Little known fact, everyone, candidates are actually people. Just like you and me. Like, they probably have sock drawers, which is off the top of my head the most human thing I can think of. Bringing humanity into the room like Jamie wanted. So as humans, we want to get to know a little bit more about them. I'm going to do a few points of order. We're only going to allow rebuttals, and you have to kind of claim them if a candidate has been referenced in a way that they think is incorrect and may need to clarify a point. But generally speaking, we're sort of expecting them to talk about themselves and not about each other. For you all, if you think that an answer is clear, you're really loving the response, you can feel free to raise your green fans. If you think the candidate is not answering the question or you're confused, you can raise the red fans. It's not meant to panic you. It's just so I don't have to be like, you're not answering the question. They'll tell you if you need to kind of pivot and re-explain something. So we're going to meet the candidates and we're going to just dig into some questions. I have practiced the intro a lot because one of you has a last name that I suspect is often mispronounced. And so everybody, please welcome Kelly Bruff and Mike Jasunstundee. I love you. I'm so sorry, Mike. I promise I practiced. If I say it slowly, I think I can get it.
It happens all the time.
Johnston. Whew, okay. So we're just going to jump in. Are you all ready? You feel okay? Yes, ma'am. Okay. So the questions in this first section, they're going to focus on the candidate's leadership style, management philosophy, and approach to decision making. First off, you've both been in leadership positions for decades. What about your leadership style has changed or evolved during that time? And we're going to start with Kelly, but let me also say something I forgot to say. We do have a timekeeper here. I'm going to tell you how much time you have for each question. He has a few signs, and he'll also raise his hand when there's 10 seconds left.
And how long do we have?
So the first question, you're going to have 1 minute. Do you remember the question?
Yeah. In 1 minute, how is my leadership
That's right.
style?
Everything about your life in 1 minute.
Hey, listen, I'm used to 30 seconds, so.
You can
begin. Boy, I think almost everything about my leadership style has advanced or changed. Here's what I would say the most fundamental change is. I'm much more collaborative today than when I started in my career. And in ways that even drive some of my teammates crazy, like when I have full authority to hire people, I create actually committees and teams with vastly different backgrounds to come together to make that hire for two reasons. One is my experience is way more diverse candidates will apply when they think they have a shot at actually coming through a process like that. And secondly, this is another great lesson in my career, success in jobs comes because people believe in you when you get hired and they get behind you and support you. And so that collaborative leadership style has really transitioned for me from just decision making or bringing teams together, but to actually even hiring. And I did it on time.
Thank you, Kelly. Mike, 1 minute for you.
Thank you so much. Great to see you all. I am excited to see what I can say to get the red flags waving, so I'll work on that as a life goal as we go on. So 2 things. For me, one would be changing. I think when I first started my career, I'd have a big idea and just run with it and wait until you got all the way down the road and figured out what people thought was wrong about it. I now find it turns out to be a much better idea to listen on the front end and sit down with folks and say, what are your thoughts? What do you think the problem is? What's your experience with it? What's worked? What hasn't? That's made a big difference for me. The second, going from big picture to details, is actually, I think I'm much more detailed about follow-through now. I think early in my career, you'd sit down with a bunch of folks, throw a bunch of ideas around, and be like, all right, that was great. And everyone leaves not knowing exactly what's going to happen next. Now I'm much more focused on every time you have a conversation, what is the immediate next action step? Who's taking it? What are they doing? By when? So that we find those ideas actually get into action, because there are a lot of great meetings you find with good ideas that never get into action. So for me, that's a big idea and execution idea.
Great, thank you. Always make to-do lists and always have lunch on your to-do list so you can cross it off. Question 2. Gen Z has the lowest trust of government agencies and elected officials in our nation's history, and many Denverites from historically marginalized communities have historic and current reasons not to trust the government. Voter turnout for this election was very low, which means the majority of Denverites didn't vote for either of you. Ouch. That was on the piece of paper, I just had to read it. Or they didn't vote at all. So how will you earn the trust of Denverites? We're going to start with Mike. You have 2 minutes this time.
Great question. So I think the first part is, I think a lot of people don't see that they feel like government works for them, or is either directly listening or is directly taking action on things that matter the most. So I feel like we have an obligation to do both. One is first to listen much better. How do we make ourselves available to community members and community leaders so they know that they can be heard on the issues that matter to them? When I was elected to the state senate, I opened a community office in North Park Hill. I was the only one in the legislature at that time that did that. And did that in one of the neighborhoods that had the least access to people or to elected officials. So people knew they could walk in the door at any time and come get a question answered if they had it. We had a citizens cabinet where if you had interest or life experience in any one of these issues, you had a family member who had been in a correctional facility, or you had tried to get a job at the Workforce Development Center and it didn't work. Those are the kind of people that were at the table helping us design policy in the first place. I think that matters a lot at the front end. And the second is, I think people want to hear that the ideas they put out actually get put into place. They want to see that there's a direct relationship between the feedback they gave and what you did. So when we have people that came to us with concerns about criminal justice sentencing, because you could be sentenced if you were in a robbery and there were 4 people behind the counter, you could be sentenced for 4 separate charges that all had to run consecutively, which led to massive over-sentencing. Someone walked in the door, told us that story. We ran a bill later that year and changed that practice. So I think what people are looking for is an open door, the chance to listen, and then that real action is taken when you do listen.
Thank you. Kelly, 2 minutes.
I really appreciate this question. When I was the CEO of the Chamber, one of the issues we saw was exactly this issue of our youngest generation was unaffiliating or registering as independent at, frankly, the greatest rate in the nation. And so we led an effort to open primaries in the state of Colorado. I have so many funny stories about it, but I do have to share one. When we were opening primaries, we first took the bill to the legislature and said, we'd like to open primaries so unaffiliated voters can vote in a primary and they can choose which one without having to change their affiliation. Because we had the largest percentage of Coloradans who were unaffiliated now, and by the way, Denver leading a lot of that as well. And when I went back to my board of directors, they said, who opposed it? And I said, only the Democrats and Republicans. Everybody else loved it. Just to say, we had to put it on the ballot ourselves to get it passed. This, I think, is important, though, when we think about the next generation. I think we have to take steps to look at our systems and our structures that were actually built to keep people out instead of to ensure people could make it easier to engage. I would continue to look at systems like that. Another great lesson in leadership for me has been, I rarely know the answer, but I do know how to get to the folks who do, and talking to those generations who don't have trust, to the communities who've been disenfranchised, and asking them, what are the steps we take? How do we change our processes? So you can actually engage with government in a meaningful way and have the kind of impact that can improve your lives.
Thank you. Your all's internal clocks are really good. All right.
We've been doing this a while.
So personally, I think, and I suspect everyone in this room thinks, that the last ballot was really overwhelming for a lot of voters, choosing one candidate in such a large field of choices. Across the country, discussions of different versions of ranked choice voting are gaining ground. Would you support ranked choice voting for future elections? Why or why not? It's just a 1-minute question, and we'll start with Kelly.
Yeah, I'm very interested in ranked choice voting because it would mean we'd be done. Thanks for laughing at my jokes. I am interested in it, and I think it's worthy of us having more public conversations about, I feel like I'm the voice of God, right? I think it would be worthy of further discussion about, could this work better and more effectively and engage people? I'm also interested, though, should our election be in November? Would that increase participation and make it easier for people who are more used to November elections? So I'm very open to strategies that increase participation without thinking about, does it benefit me, but really, does it benefit our democracy?
All right, thank you. Mike.
Yes, I also think that ranked choice for voting would be a great addition, and for a few reasons. One is I think that when we talk to people who didn't vote, and people would say, oh, but they weren't interested. And in fact, it was quite the opposite. They took their job very seriously. When you looked at a ballot that had 17 people on it, that takes a very long time to work on. It's sort of like cleaning the refrigerator. You know you should do it, but you never say, that's what I think I'm going to spend the next hour doing. And so I think we do want to make that ballot easier to access. I thought it was great that we had such a wonderful, diverse group of candidates from all backgrounds. And a lot of people said, I wish there was some way to have a smaller group of candidates earlier you could have gotten to know better, whether that was slightly higher thresholds for signature gathering or other ways to get on the ballot. I think that would have helped say, great, let's keep grassroots access to the ballot, but let's also make it manageable for voters to be able to do their homework, be engaged, and cast an informed ballot.
Did he just liken us to leftovers?
I don't think so.
Cleaning the fridge.
Yeah, that's true.
All right, next question. Being mayor means taking positions that are not always win-win. So let's talk about some tough decisions. The first section is a rapid fire section, rapid fire. So you can write your answers down on your giant pieces of orange sticky pad. I don't know if y'all have pens that people can see from a distance. I have one Sharpie. I'm not showing a preference. I'm a neutral party. I'm just kidding. Oh, you have one. Okay, great. All right. Rapid fire questions. You can't pick both, obviously. You got to just pick one. So I'm going to put you into some tough positions here. Broncos or Nuggets? Write it down. This is very serious business. You could lose some votes here. Okay. Okay. It's getting interesting, folks. It's getting interesting. Let's get even more serious. Bacon or Kevin Bacon? Go. You're winning and losing votes on it. Okay, okay. Yeah, sames. Okay, they're the same on that one. Area 51 or Studio 54? Area 51 or Studio 54? Oh, okay. Matching up, matching up. And finally, James Garfield or lasagna? James Garfield or lasagna?
You're just trying to see if I can spell this.
That's right. It's a test. Can you spell lasagna? But you both figured out the test. All right. Now, for real, can you share an example of an unpopular decision you've made in the past and how you would apply that kind of decision making as mayor? This is not rapid fire. Don't write it down. I'm sorry. I should have adjusted that. Write it down really quick. People will read it. It's fine. You're going to have actually 2 minutes to respond, and I'm going to repeat the question for you. And Kelly, you're going to go first. Can you share an example of an unpopular decision you've made in the past and how you would apply that kind of decision making as mayor.
Yeah. I'm going to use one that had to do with when I was at the chamber, and I was recommending support of our LGBTQ plus community, specifically 2 issues. I was asking my board to testify at the legislature in opposition to what were framed as religious freedom bills. They were really discriminatory. And to submit an amicus brief on behalf of the Masterpiece Cake Shop issue that went to the Supreme Court. And it's tough, right? This is an emotional conversation in an organization that isn't used to having that conversation. How I approached it was very honest and open, and tried to frame it in a manner that I think started to engage a much broader audience around why I thought those issues were important. It turned out we not only opposed those bills, but we went all the way to the Supreme Court with one Colorado. And I will tell you where it got tough is when the Supreme Court didn't agree with us. But here's what I found. Our members were very proud to have taken a position on a set of values that we could share across a political spectrum because of the work we did in advance. And it was tough, but I think it was the right decision, and I'm very proud to have led an organization in a direction they normally wouldn't have gone.
Thank you, Colleen. All right, Mike, 2 minutes, an unpopular decision you've made in the past and how you apply that to that decision making as mayor.
One of the things that we were working on after 2020 in the midst of the aftermath of George Floyd's murder is what are the things that we could do to aggressively take on closing gaps that existed in Colorado. I was leading a foundation then. And one of the things we found was that the most profound gaps that existed between black and white families in this state were not about income, they were about wealth. And that those gaps overwhelmingly were coming from the inability to buy and own homes. And so we thought that there was a space to build a fund specifically dedicated, trying to close that wealth gap by giving people access to down payment assistance. We decided we wanted to build an explicitly race-based fund. That meant that it was dedicated to families who were black or African American who had had legacies or histories of being denied access to funds. And that means we had to get approval from a board and from banks and from outside investors who were not comfortable with the idea that they would purely back a race-based fund. And that meant we had to convince them that in this case, these inequalities were not created by race-neutral policies, and they were not going to be changed by race-neutral policies. And so we had to convince those organizations that were very uncomfortable that the right thing to do in this case was to actually support the construction of a fund that was explicitly based on race. We eventually found one bank that was willing to do that. They became our partner. We built the fund. We grew it dramatically. It's now over $12 million. We put more than 150 families into homes that will build wealth and pass it on to the next generation. And that was a battle that I thought was worth it.
All right, thank you. Moving on. As mayor of Denver, how would you prioritize the needs of city employees, and what strategies would you want to implement to foster a positive and productive company culture that values and supports city professionals? You have 1 minute, and for reasons that are confusing and just on my paper, we're starting with Kelly again.
I've worked for the city twice in my career. Frankly, I would love to go back and be part of the city team. I have deep respect for employees who devote their lives to the service of all of us. My understanding of that culture probably developed the most when I was the head of HR for the city. And some of the conversations we were having was about the Career Service Authority, which is the independent arm that depoliticizes the hiring and oversight from an HR perspective of the city employees. Here's what I found and what I would do as mayor. This is a team of people who are dedicated to service. They take it seriously. They're devoting their lives to it in many instances. My experience is they work way harder than they get credit for because what's highlighted are the few exceptions to that reality. My other experience is they're as committed to being held accountable and to not having someone who's not performing sitting next to them as we are. I would honor their service that way by recognizing their performance and ensuring everybody's delivering.
Thank you, Kelly. We forgive you for those few extra seconds. Mike, you can have a few extra seconds.
That's okay. Can you hear me if I don't use the microphone? No. Okay. You get the weird, like, 1 second reverb delay? It's very weird because I say something and then it's said a second later after me, so it's a little disorienting. So if I collapse at some point, you know that's why. For me, this is about a couple of very key issues about how we approach working with city and county employees. And I'm actually very proud that I've spent time visiting with them, and I've been endorsed by both the city and county employees union. And I think it starts with, one, sitting down and listening. Those people know the best of anyone what's working on the job and what's currently not working, what the city's doing well, what the city's not doing well. So I think it always starts with that conversation first. I always find I've loved jobs the most where I feel like there's a big, inspiring vision. There's something that I want to call to be a part of, and that I see my direct role and how I have a place in delivering on that big vision, and that I feel effective every day at being able to do that. And that means you have the supports, you have the resources that you need, you have the clarity of vision and the clarity of communication. And for me, that's the most important thing. Everybody needs to feel good at their job. So I'd both want to listen, I'd want to set a big vision, inspire people to want to be a part of it, folks that are here now, folks that are not yet, that could see themselves as wanting to work for the city and join this mission, because we got to bring hundreds, thousands of more people who want to be a part of filling these jobs that we need. So you got to love to do this work again. And for me, those would be the top priorities. Stop.
All right, thank you both. This final question of this section has a rapid fire element to it. So you're going to write something down, but then you're also going to follow it up with a little bit of talking. So you're going to write down 2 of your mentors, and to see if you can handle the pressure, I'm going to be like, do, 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 as you write, because that song puts panic in everyone. So 2 of your mentors, write them down. Do, 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 whoop, do, 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 bum, ba-dum, bum, 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 bum. I think they might do it twice in reality, or we're coming to the end there. Do you both feel like you had time to get them down? Yeah. Okay, so you've got your mentors down, and we're giving you 1 minute to tell us a little bit about them, and we're going to start with Mike.
Great. I'm trying to recycle paper, so I use the other side, so apologize if that's not clear. 1 minute about each of them?
No, both, so it's a real
Wow.
panic situation. Like,
Wow,
this is
I feel like I just disserved my mentors. So mine, one his name is Hildegard, the other is Charlotte. Hildegard was the psychiatrist who was my boss when I first became a school principal. I ran a school that served all kids in state custody. And she helped us think differently about how we could find every kid, no matter what history of trauma or abuse or disadvantage they'd had, and help find a path forward. I only get 30 seconds. She deserves much more than that. Charlotte Chancio was the first superintendent I worked for when I was a school principal up in Adams County. She hired me to run a high school up there, and she really gave me a ton of autonomy and belief, probably gave me more leadership than I was ready for, and inspired us and our team to try to dream big. And that's been a trait I try to give to all the people I lead now.
Thank you, Mike. Kelly.
This is more emotional than I expected. I haven't been asked this question. So my 2 are Catherine Archuleta and Al LeCabe. I worked in the administration in the city with both of these people. If you know them, they're probably some of the best leaders you would ever work with. The reason I'd highlight them is one of the most challenging issues I faced in my career was our city attorney took his life when I was chief of staff. And these 2 people modeled for me what it looks like for a team to navigate probably the most devastating loss I've ever experienced in my career. And they are 2 people who I think have, in their own lives, experienced great loss and great challenge and been marginalized, and just their leadership was stellar, and their love of their teammates got us through it. And I try to think about what they did as a leader, frankly, every day.
Thank you both for that. Absolutely, we should give you so much time to talk about the people that inspire you, but actually in that little bit of time, it's a nice, important little glimpse into the people that you look up to. So we appreciate that. That was the biggest section of the night. So the most questions of one section just came at you. You can, I don't know if you need to shake it out or anything like that, spin around to get your energy out. I don't know how you two are feeling. I still feel kind of sick to my stomach about the whole thing. You know, I'm like, I write plays.
Mike did a mic drop.
I dropped the mic.
Drop. So now we're going to talk about strategic vision. So questions in this category focus on the candidate's vision for the city, understanding of the industry landscapes, and ability to develop and execute a strategic plan. This first question that's coming at you is going to have a lot of silly stuff in it, but then there's like a serious question at the end, which I feel like I shouldn't have had to say that because I've already done that to you, but whatever, I'm saying it there. So here we go. We all want to know that our leaders are prepared for any crisis. It's inevitable that you will face the unexpected and will have to manage something unforeseen. On opening day for the Colorado Rockies, an asteroid is sighted heading directly towards Devil's Tower in Wyoming. Though Denver won't face a direct hit, we will suffer the consequences of the impact. With hundreds of thousands of people gathered in the streets for the perfect spring day, word of the asteroid spreads and chaos ensues, overwhelming the city's emergency services and infrastructure. As mayor of Denver, the fate of the city rests in your hands, as you must prioritize resources, manage the crisis, and develop both short and long-term strategies to protect and serve the community. What do you do in the first hour, and who are the 5 people you need next to you to manage this very real crisis? Mike, you have 2 minutes.
Have you seen the movie?
Declare open bar at Coors Field. Okay, so we got one green flag. Okay, yes. Yeah, what you don't do is sit and have dinner and let the world get exploded, right? I think that's what we learned from the film. So the first thing we would do is, yes, you would need to convene. This is going to be a regional and national problem, so I would want to talk to the governor of Colorado, the governor of Wyoming. I would want to call to the national security advisor. I would probably want to talk to the president. And then we would need to talk to probably someone at Space Defense to see what the strategy was on intercepting said asteroid. Space Force, thank you. Hopefully we'll be back in Colorado by the time this happens, so it's a shorter attack than it might be from Alabama. So I think those would all be first steps, or how do you try to intercept that from actually happening? And then if not, you have to be prepared. I assume that we're not going to have tsunamis yet because it's going to hit land in Wyoming. So you're talking about earthquakes and displacement. So the risks are getting people out of high buildings and getting them away from areas where you're going to have potential collapses, getting them out into open spaces. Those would be my first initial steps, but I'm hoping the NSA and the federal government is going to help us intercept that before it hits the ground. And if not, the bar is still open.
Thank you for entertaining the question. Kelly.
I think this is called the Democratic National Convention, which I had to oversee. It felt like an asteroid was hitting Denver, and we had to respond. I'm going to try to do this seriously, and I really hope this doesn't happen. So I first stand up the city's Emergency Management Operations Center. In that, you have a number of teammates who immediately come in. It includes some regional teammates who are part of it. The state of Colorado has a Department of Homeland Security who would probably be part of that. In our own city, it's everybody in safety services, the city attorney, the mayor. But we're going to need the governor and the president, I think, on this one, because now we're interstate. So I would call President Biden. Just joking. By the way, NORAD is in Colorado Springs. This is the North America, I'm going to get the name wrong, but they watch the airspace through all of North America on behalf of Canada, Mexico, and the United States, and I would engage them immediately as well.
All right, thank you.
That is definitely a question we've not gotten yet.
Really? I find that really surprising.
Totally.
I'm going to work on that
Especially
answer.
when there were 17 of you. You didn't get that one?
Usually when we get this question, the asteroid hits Arizona, so that's why it's been different.
Yeah,
Slight
subtle
modification.
differences. Subtle
Southern
differences.
response.
All right, next question. What is your approach to innovation, and how do you stay up to date with industry trends and emerging technologies that move a city forward? And what cities do you think are getting it right? 1 minute for this one, and we're going to start with you, Kelly.
Yeah, this is a cool thing the chamber started doing like 40 years ago, taking 165 civic leaders to another city every year, specifically to study what they do, steal their best ideas, and bring them home. I actually think there's huge value in looking at what other cities do around the world. And how I stay up with it is young people in particular. I got the chance to work at MSU Denver last year, and the kind of innovation you see our young people looking at, it's a foundation to some of my housing policy, comes out of Munich, and building on parking lots, which I thought was one of the good ideas someone put on our board up here. So I would rely on our universities and our institutions, our young people, our public, private, and nonprofit sectors looking at other cities. I don't think there's a single city in the world that is nailing everything. I do think almost every city has something to teach us, something we could steal from them and implement here to improve our lives.
Thank you. Mike, you're up.
I think the most important part for me is being a constant learner. So I think the first thing I do is read a lot of often other sources of things that are working. The other is talk to people that are experts in these spaces. And for me, the most relevant experts are often nonprofit leaders, entrepreneurs who see hard social problems and they're every day out there trying to solve them. They can tell you exactly what's working, what's not, what's missing. I think that can be a key partner. I think there are often for-profit partners doing the same thing, trying to find innovations in certain spaces, whether it's different strategies for growing business, for trying to find interventions for young kids that don't know how to read, whatever the problem might be. So I think it's learning from those folks as much as possible. And then I do think it's going to visit places that have figured out parts of it. If you just take something like homelessness, I learned a ton from visiting both Houston and Austin. It's strange, actually, Texas does this quite well. Not a phrase I thought I would say ever about Texas. But they have figured out a number of key solutions here. And that was a great chance to travel those cities, learn what individual things they're doing well, how to figure out how that might apply to the Denver context, and then bring them back home.
Great, thank you. So there's a little rapid fire section, but I don't actually think it's going to be easier to write it down. I think it's going to be easier for you all to just sort of call it out, because you actually kind of touched on this, Kelly, briefly. Which 3 ideas on the big board caught your attention? And Kelly, maybe call 3 out, and then Mike call 3 out.
So one of the ones I love is Limit Wall Street, the institutional purchase of homes. Today in Colorado, 1 in 4 of our single-family homes is being bought by outside speculators. I think we have to find some solutions to that. Another one I loved was turning big parking lots into apartments, safe spaces. I totally agree with this. Surface parking lots are probably one of the worst uses that you could have, and really focused. And I'm going to slip in the ADU shout out in basements in that one, because it's just a housing issue. And then the other one I really liked was cabinet appointments. This one simply says, you know, representative of our community demographics, but for me, this is about engaging our community and picking who runs our city.
Thank you. Mike.
The first one I picked was more incentives for climate action and mitigation work in buildings, vehicles, and materials. I feel like Denver ought to be the most aggressive and most successful city in the country on climate. We live in a beautiful environment. We're known for that brand. We should really lead on that and lean into it. So I'm excited to think more about how we think big on climate. The other one was more protected bike lanes and close more streets to cars. How do we find ways to make this more walker-friendly, more bike-friendly, so people can get around to walkable, livable neighborhoods as much as possible? Very excited about that. And the third one, which I loved, was add beauty back into the public realm. I think the idea for us is it's not just about public safety, it's about how do you bring joy all the way back into all the neighborhoods and streets of Denver, and that is often about art. Very excited to have a full policy platform on art, and so if you want to talk more about that, excited about how we think about this as a city of creators and innovators and builders, and how we bring that beauty back to all parts of our everyday life.
Nice, thank you both, and thank you to everybody who contributed to the big idea board. I mean, I'm a little surprised neither of you picked the thing about the one-ply toilet paper, but whatever.
It was the fourth.
It was fourth, okay, it was fourth. It was coming up, next question. Throughout the debates, candidates have spoken very little, if at all, about the role of artificial intelligence and the impacts it will have on our economy and the future of work and the future of our city. What is your vision for AI in Denver? And please assure me that it's not encouraging Elon Musk to move to Denver. Go, Mike, 2 minutes.
It is not. Yeah, I think this is one where the first place we're seeing this disruption is in education and in journalism and in places we're talking about who are the creators and what do people do to curate content. I will say the good hope was there was a city council person who launched a candidate that was an AI candidate in this race, and that candidate did not succeed. So maybe there is still some human advantage against the system. I think it's about putting boundaries around this to figure out how it can be helpful to improve systems and where we're going to draw the line to say there are certain things that it shouldn't do. There are certain things that we still should require and expect human judgment over. But there are things like the ability to source vast amounts of information and curate it and digest it and make it available for residents, for city council people, for mayors, to be able to get access to more information and distill it for us to still apply human judgment, I think can be useful. I don't want it to be making those judgment decisions for us.
Thank you. Kelly.
Yeah, I think for me what my primary focus would be the impact on jobs for people and the risk of who's losing their jobs and how do we protect those that are really good jobs. We have AI today that we know can do a better job on surgery than a doctor can do. The upside of that is it could actually help us address the desperate need for more health coverage in our nation and addressing the lack of access and follow-up issues. So to me, this range of issues that we have to think about, I think the greatest concern has been, and opportunity has been probably in service jobs. These are lower paid jobs. They're not as good of jobs, but we have a lot of people in them. And I think a huge part of where we have to focus, and I would as mayor, is working together to identify what are the industries we have the greatest risk of loss of those jobs, and how do we retrain so people aren't left with nothing, but instead seeing a path to greater opportunity and frankly, greater income.
Great, thank you. I sort of just think if you want all of your people and your artwork to have 7 fingers, AI is the way to go, right? 9 fingers sometimes, it depends.
I am pro more fingers.
More fingers in art. Oh, 1 anti, 1 plus. It's really all over the boards, everyone. All right, in a city with an independent school district, what is your approach for working with DPS to decrease youth violence, increase workforce opportunities, and ensure the highest quality education for all kids in Denver? And who are the key stakeholders in these conversations, and what's a risk if we don't get it right? I know that was a lot of questions. Do with it what you will in 2 minutes. We're going to start with you, Kelly.
Yeah, this is an important one. I will say I think I've been in 70 living rooms and 50 coffee shops in the last 6 months. And last fall, this discussion was much more about our kids learning. I'm dyslexic. It was a 3rd grade teacher who frankly saved my life. I didn't know in 3rd grade she saved my life, but I do as an adult now, because the #1 predictor of graduation from high school is reading in 3rd grade at grade level. And the school to prison pipeline is about 3rd grade reading. And so today in Denver public schools, less than 1 in 4 of our kids of color and low-income kids are reading at grade level in 3rd grade. It's a crisis. And more recently, we now have a safety challenge before us. Here's what I would do as your mayor. I think we have to regain the confidence in our school board. Whether I was meeting with teachers, parents, students, civic leaders, families, nobody had the confidence that our school board had its eye on the issue of keeping our kids safe and our teachers safe and giving our teachers the support to educate our kids in the manner they deserve. There's 3 seats up in November, and I would work in community to identify who are the 3 people that would regain your trust and confidence that they could keep our kids safe and deliver the education they deserve. And like all relationships, I wouldn't just focus on the accountability piece, I'd focus on the partnership and support. And I would move quickly to the support piece, and I would hope to take other nonprofits and employers with me. And I think one of the greatest opportunities is paid internships and paid apprenticeships. Today, the city of Denver has about 10% of its jobs that we can't fill. I would look at Denver Public Schools as a partner where kids earn and learn 2 days a week with me, 3 days a week they're in high school, and we help get our kids to that starting line of graduation so they can find a path to the real opportunities that they deserve and that we're building for their future. Wow, dude, I just gotta say, that was like beautiful stop on the...
Perfect timing. Mike.
Thank you. Having had the chance of spending a lot of my early career as a teacher and a school principal, this is particularly powerful because this partnership is going to be what makes the city really wonderful or what makes it really struggle. And so I think it starts with a collaboration. I think one of the things I would do is there has been in the past a city and school district coordinating committee where you have school board members, you have city council members, you have the mayor, you have the superintendent, and they're sitting down at the table together having regular conversations about priorities that we all align on, even things like new school openings or school closures or transit lines. Those all really matter to make things work more smoothly. I also think there are other shared priorities like prevention, getting kids access to positive peer groups through after school and summer school programming, making sure all kids have access to those, not just the kids that can afford to pay for it. We want to be able to make that possible and make that expanded throughout the city. It's also intervention. When we have kids that we know are struggling, they might be at risk, they have mental health needs, we need to do better on providing mental health supports throughout the schools. Right now, the city's obligation is to fund Denver Health to do that. We're not funding them enough to be able to stand up counselors in all of the high schools around the city. Not only have they survived a pandemic, these are young people that are surviving real epidemics of school violence, and we're still not giving them the basic mental health support that we know that we need. So I think those two are really critical. And the third one, of course, is school safety. And this is one where we have to work in partnership. We got to make sure the city's doing our part to keep neighborhoods and the surrounding areas safe. And we got to make sure we're working with schools to make sure they have all the protection they need. It's not security alone. You do need prevention. We do need intervention. We do need mental health support. And when we have situations where there are kids and families or teachers who want security in their buildings, if they want access to school resource officers, I think school communities should get to choose that. And if they don't want them, they don't need to choose that. But schools that want them should be able to have that access, and I'd support them in doing that.
All right, thank you both. This is the last little question of this section. It is a rapid fire one, so you can use your pads, your giant pads. Please write 5 words that describe our city and 1 word that is missing that you plan to work on as mayor. So 5 words that you think describe our city already, 1 word that you'd like to work on, and I'll just give you a little bit of time. There we go. That's right, Jeopardy. Yes. Do y'all remember back a long, long time ago? I think I'm going to show my age. Only certain people will remember this. When on Wheel of Fortune, when you won a round, you used to get to go shopping in like the weird room, and you'd be like, I want the lamp for $70. That was my favorite part of Wheel of Fortune. It's probably better to win the money, but whatever. I liked it when they had to go shopping for things they maybe didn't want. Just giving you all time. It was a long time ago. If either of you is finished, you can share while the other's still writing. I'll just do like a little soft shoe. Yes, Kelly.
I did 5 words. I'll do them in order that I actually wrote them. I said I think we're strong, resilient, hopeful, expensive, and smart. And I said the thing I think we have to improve is community, a sense that we're in this together and that we can find a path forward to build a city that works for every single person in it.
Mike.
Mine are, sorry. Yeah.
Mike.
Thank you. Mike squared. So mine are creativity, possibility. I did also say expensive. I said homelessness, and I said struggle. There's both a great sense of what's possible, and there's a sense of a struggle to get there. I think those things are both true at the same time. And the thing that I want to see that I worry is not true now is equity. is I think we have the risk of feeling like a city with two Denvers, where there are some neighbors that are really thriving and some that are really struggling. And I want that not to be true.
Thank you both. That's the end of that section. How are you both feeling?
Good.
Yeah, y'all are doing great. I'm throwing
Well,
a lot
thank you.
of stuff
The
at you.
feedback is very nice.
I'm just throwing things your way, and you're making it happen. All right, next section is operation.
Lasagna coming later?
Oh, you hope there is. You hope, or you hope that James Garfield is going to show up. All right, the next section is operational experience. So questions in this category will focus on the candidate's experience and ability to manage operations, finances, and other aspects of running a city. So number one, how will you improve internal communications and collaboration processes among city agencies so that community organizations and strategic partners can more easily accomplish their shared goals? Mike, 1 minute.
Great, speed round. I think there are two critical jobs you have as the mayor. One is, of course, to hire and attract amazing talent in the senior leadership at the cabinet, but that's necessary but not sufficient, because you actually have to, in addition to hiring those great people, you have to make sure those people then meld together as a unified team that are working really well together, not just taking on individual work in their individual silos. And I think you have to have a feeling that the city's goals are everyone's shared goals, and every member of that senior team ought to be as committed to accomplishing the goals of other departments as the goals of their own. And so that we feel a shared responsibility to make sure we're delivering on all those. And I think a shared value that our fundamental job is to run a customer service facing organization, that our job is to make it easy for people in the city to access services and to get back a responsible, respectful, timely feedback or answer so people can do the work they want to do and do it quickly.
Thank you. Kelly, you're up.
I think I'd probably use the budget process to try to engage community and the city council more. My experience in the city was I see the budget as a moral document. It's a communication of our priorities, your priorities, and so I think we have to have a more open, transparent process that engages our community and city council. When I was chief of staff, one of the things we would do is we'd present the budget and have a conversation before we built the first draft budget. So together, we're exploring what are the critical issues community by community as we build that budget, and we start to buy into it together. So when we're executing it, we're doing it as a team now, not fighting each other or disagreeing, but delivering results for our residents.
Great, thank you. Next question. How is the city's approach to participatory budgeting working, and how will you approach the idea of PB as mayor? But before either of you answer, while this is a good, like, semi-explanation of it, I'm gonna bring up Evan to tell you how, what it is, in case you don't know what it is in the real world. You really don't have more than a minute yourself, and I'm sorry the mic is super sweaty.
Oh, God, okay. This is difficult. Who, greens or reds? Do you know what participatory budgeting is? Green if you do, reds if you do. Okay, all right, cool. Most of you know. It's basically similar to, how it interacts with what Kelly just said, is that in some ways it cuts them out of the situation a little bit. And so it's more like what you did here, and it's where neighborhoods get to decide a portion of the city budget. And this year was the first year that Denver tried it out, and this next year coming up, hopefully it will be bigger and better. And that's like another idea that we've stolen from other places that do it. And while I'm here, no, go ahead.
Thank you, Evan. I will say, how many of you voted in the participatory budget voting rounds? It was the most fun I've ever had voting. So everyone, honestly, you search it out. Make sure that you're in on the next round. It is honestly like really exciting. So do you remember the question? I'll repeat it. How is the city's approach to participatory budgeting working, and how will you approach the idea of PB as mayor? 1 minute, and we're starting with Kelly.
I think it's a start. I think we probably could go much further. And I think the opportunity is to get neighborhood by neighborhood thinking about what are the issues in your neighborhood where you would allocate resources The dollar amounts, I'm doing it from memory, but extremely small when you consider the budget is $1.7 billion, just the general fund. And that's the piece that we really want to do the participatory budgeting. I think it also allows community to not only say where you might put the dollars, but to give very specific examples of programs that we're not providing or we should stop providing. And to me, that's the part we have not done well enough to say what would we pull back on and instead shift that money to try to address. And I would add one more thing to it. I think becoming outcome focused, not just where would you put the money, but what are we trying to produce with those dollars? How do we know if we delivered the result you wanted? So the next year when we do it, we're testing ourselves on the results of how we allocated money.
Great, thanks. Mike.
Thank you. I think it also is a good start, and I think there's more that we can do. The two things I'm excited about doing is, yes, it's one thing to say, do you want to spend more money on transit and mobility? And that's a good first start. But what's actually more interesting is to go to then the substantive question of what do people want to see in their very neighborhood. So if there is a conversation about these are streets we'd like to see closed to vehicles to be able to have access for more bike lanes, or these are places where we're worried the intersection is currently unsafe and we need to have traffic slowed in that area because there's a crosswalk close by. I think it's one thing to opine on how the dollars should be spent in the big buckets. I think the even more powerful version of it is how do we connect those big bucket of dollars to direct projects or investments that align with people's bigger visions so that they can both see the things that they want are being funded and also being delivered.
Great, thank you. Next question. How would you prioritize the budget for the city of Denver, and what areas would you focus on investing in or cutting funding from? Respond to any differences between the audience's budget boards and your priorities if you so choose. Mike, you have 2 minutes.
Great. So I don't know if I can lay out my entire budget by sticky note in 2 minutes, but I'd say to the first part of your question, my number one priority on budget funding is going to be around homelessness and housing. So this is, I think, the single top priority for the city is how do we make sure that this city is affordable and that this city is welcoming to everybody who is trying to make their way. And so my real focus would be on first being able to establish micro communities where we can create housing, safe, dignified, stable housing for folks who are unhoused. We can get them heating and air conditioning and shelter and access to bathrooms and the ability to get showers and kitchens and all the things that they need, and access to the wraparound services people need, like mental health support and addiction treatment, workforce training, long-term housing support, and we can do that by concentrating those services around the city. That is a major priority focus. The second is it's not only about folks who are unhoused. Right now we know 80% of the teachers, nurses, firefighters in this city cannot right now afford to live in this city, and we have to dramatically change that outcome. So I would really prioritize resources to build 25,000 permanently affordable rental units. And so the way those would be structured is that if you lived in one of these units, and anyone who makes $80,000, $90,000, $100,000 a year or less is still eligible, because we know as right now you can make $80,000 a year in Denver and still not be able to afford to live here, which means we have to provide housing for those folks because the market is not going to do that on their own. So what that would mean is people could live in these units and they are deed restricted, so you wouldn't have to pay more than 30% of whatever you make. So the example here is if you are a first-year teacher or a server making $40,000 a year, then your rent does not go over $1,000 a month. And your rent cannot go up unless your income goes up. And that means people don't have to spend every end of the month worried that the landlord's going to show up, raise the rent, and you're going to be out of a place to stay. We have to provide our most important public servants that kind of safety and security so they can stay in Denver and provide the amazing services they're providing now.
Thank you. Kelly, you're up.
Definitely housing and homelessness is also my priority. This year's budget has about $254 million in Denver's budget. It is one of the largest single budgets in the city today. Not only do I think we have to immediately get people to safer locations who are unhoused in our city. For me, this is about saving lives. Last year, 173 people died because they're unhoused in our city. The year before, 269 died. I think this priority cannot be emphasized enough. What we didn't have on housing and homelessness, though, was the wraparound support services that we know people desperately need. I still put my sticker there saying it's got to be part of what we're addressing here, because housing alone is not going to help people fully address some of the challenges they're facing, and I think we have to be committed. It's also why, though, I believe in the long term, we have to invite the entire region to do this work with us. I don't think we alone can address this issue. I've met with mayors throughout the region. 6 mayors in the metro area in office today endorsed my homeless plan and me as a candidate, saying we gotta do this work together if we're really gonna improve people's lives, and I'm committed to it. I would also move money in that budget to focus on prevention. We know it's way less expensive to keep people housed than to try to take someone after they've lost their housing and dealing with the trauma of that. And so I would move resources inside that budget to try to address that issue. I too would focus on workforce housing. I'm particularly interested in forced sale, where you can actually own again and build wealth, because this is how we build wealth in our nation. I'd build that housing myself as your mayor on those surface parking lots throughout our city, where you could now own a home in a neighborhood you never could have bought, where your kids can go to schools they never could have accessed, and we actually start to build the social capital that we know makes a city work in the long term. So we're starting to address the full range across our housing market so people who work in Denver can stay in Denver.
Thank you. I know it's a lot of information to try to jam in. Last question in this section is a rapid fire question. If you know so much about money and finances, which I broadly associate with math, answer me this. If a train is traveling from Elbert, Colorado to Allens Park, Colorado at a speed of 55 miles an hour, I'm kidding, of course, but honestly though, wouldn't it be awesome if we had a more comprehensive train system all around the United States? Which the mayor of Denver cannot be in control of, but it'd be cool.
It would be faster than driving, whatever the question is.
Whatever the question is, faster than driving. All right, hey, it's the last section before final remarks, so we're in the home stretch. Good work, everyone. We're doing it. This section is on communication and stakeholder management. So questions in this category focus on the candidate's ability to communicate effectively with a wide range of stakeholders and build positive relationships. All right. Effective communication is crucial for any leader, especially when it comes to sharing a clear vision and implementing policy changes. As mayor of Denver, you'll need to communicate with a wide range of stakeholders, including city employees, Denver residents, and other groups with varying opinions, needs, and interests. The voters recently said no to the development of a Park Hill golf course, and the issue is wildly contentious, as we all know. How will you approach communication with all those different groups when introducing a new vision for the course that may impact them? 2 minutes, and we're going to start with you, Kelly.
Yeah, I think it actually started when we were taking our own positions during the campaign about how do we look at this issue. And for me, that was waiting to get good information. I think I met with probably 25 people involved in this issue, really understanding it from multiple perspectives, drawing conclusion about how I would vote. I did vote yes on it. But at the same moment, I voted yes, and the primary reason for me, by the way, was half a mile from a light rail station, and that's really where density should be in our city. But I said at the time, if the voters of this city say no, I'll honor that, and I'll do my best to buy it. I'll create a transparent process where we come together to define what should we be doing with Park Hill Golf Course, and how do we do it in a manner that rebuilds community. Here's my biggest concern about what happened with that golf course. For the last couple of decades, this has been an issue that people have been chatting about. And when I looked into it, what you found is that only a judge can actually remove that easement. I asked everybody involved in it, why do we keep voting on it? And I would say to you, it was for political reasons. And I don't think that's an okay process. I think the mayor's responsible for developing a process that engages community in meaningful conversations about real issues that we're making a decision on. I think we could have backed that process up at any point and said we're going to do this in a manner that builds community. Instead, we figured out how not to only divide a neighborhood, but divide an entire city. I would focus on rebuilding our city and bringing us back together, given what we've gone through on this issue.
Thank you. Mike, you're up.
Thank you. Yeah, I spent about 10 years with a community office in that neighborhood, so up in North Park Hill at 33rd and Hudson. And so when I heard from community members that the same things that would come up over and over again were three real concerns. One was North Park Hill is the last plurality black neighborhood in the city and county of Denver, and those are families that are being more and more pushed out of that neighborhood because of affordability. So the real need to have affordable rental units and affordable homeownership units very high. Is also still the largest food desert in the city and county of Denver. It's the largest place where families don't have access to fresh food, and so the need for a grocery store was very important. And in addition to that, people wanted access to really high quality outdoor open space, and the opportunity was, couldn't we do all of these things? And so I also, after listening to folks on both sides, voted yes, and said when I voted yes, I would respect the will of the voters in terms of whatever they decided. And now what I think the opportunity is we had what I think were the grounds of an agreement, which is folks that were no, that I talked to, said, we do want affordable housing. We just don't want to do it at the extent of the open space here. And folks that said that they did want affordable housing said that they also didn't want to give up the opportunity for open space. So now I think the opportunity for the next mayor is to say, how do you bring this divided community back together? How do we say we're going to protect the easement, we're going to be able to make sure we get access to meaningful open space that everyone can support and share, and we're going to contribute and commit ourselves to a longer term conversation about affordable housing, and to make sure if that is not the right place for it, that there is affordable housing that we can build in that surrounding neighborhood, because it's the right place to do it. We know that we can do density there the same way there is in Central Park Boulevard right now, just to the east, and that should be able to be an opportunity to say, great, now let's unify around a shared vision for public space, a shared vision for affordable housing, and a shared vision for access to safe and healthy foods in a robust grocery store. There ought to be a both-and solution here that I would lead as mayor.
Great, thank you both. What sectors can be more activated to help the city achieve your vision, and how are you uniquely positioned to engage them? Mike, 1 minute.
What sectors, of just all sectors?
What sectors, in the city can be more activated to achieve your vision?
So I think there are multiples. When you take something like homelessness, obviously Colorado Coalition for the Homeless is one of the sponsors here tonight. They're one of the leading voices in this community about this challenge. Those nonprofit community leaders should be the ones at the table, I think, is the first thing that I think of, because they are providing direct services every single day. They're getting feedback from our neighbors every single day about what's working, what's not working. We ought to be able to listen to them and have them tell us, where is the city letting you down as a partner? What can we do better to be able to deliver outcomes here? And how can we be a better partner? I think as mayor, the key is the city doesn't always have all the answers. All what we want to do is to set the table for people to convene who do have better and different answers that we do, and then figure out how we can facilitate them in doing the work that they're doing to do it more effectively and do it in a more coordinated way. So for me, that's where the conversation begins for the people that are pushing on the most challenging issues the city's facing, which are both homelessness and affordable housing.
Kelly, go ahead.
I think this is a place I have a huge bias in my career. The greatest challenges I think that we face, I think will only be solved when we come together as public, private, and nonprofit sectors to say we all have a responsibility in this space, in this work. I think today, on the example of homelessness, you see the nonprofit and the government sector really trying very hard to address a really complex issue, and I think our employers in the private sector have more opportunity to work with us. And I think I would work really hard to engage them in this issue and help drive solutions so their employees can afford to live in the city where they're working. But I think this way too as a region. I look around the region, or I look at industry sectors, and I think we have the opportunity to ask the question, which industry sectors have a greater obligation to work on which issues, and how can we engage them in the work? I guess I sort of look at solutions as everybody in our community has is gonna be part of the solution, and my job is to help them see how they can help support us.
All right, thank you both. I feel like this question might a little bit overlap with some of the stuff you've all talked about already, so you can, if you feel as though you've sort of addressed it, great. If there's something else that you can add to it, great. How will you bring the community together on ideas like sanctioned encampments and micro-villages, things that have been debated in the past for homelessness resolution? How will you get neighborhood buy-in? And if you don't, how will you fulfill the promise of creating alternative safe spaces for people experiencing homelessness? Kelly, we're going to start with you, and it's a 2-minute.
Yeah, I thought of this issue when you had asked about an example of a tough issue you faced in your career and what you might face as mayor. Because whether it's affordable housing or housing people who are unhoused, one of the problems is us. We're not great at inviting people into our neighborhoods or dealing with the change that's required if we're going to make this city work. And I think as mayor, what you'll see me do is show up in person to have these conversations in our communities, that the reality is people do need safer locations. We do have to build housing that's affordable and ensure people can be in every part of our city. And one of the things we know is concentrating those supports or services in one neighborhood or one area doesn't serve people as well. And we should have in every one of our neighborhoods access to housing that's more affordable and the full spectrum. I take it seriously, and frankly, I think this is why you see the bill at the state that's very controversial right now about overriding cities and our ability to manage our own land use because we're not doing a good job around it. This is one of the spaces I would ask you as residents to show up with me when we're asking a community to build housing that's necessary or needed so everyone can live in our city. And I'm going to leave you with an example. I've been on the board for Habitat for Humanity for a number of years. I was the chair last year. We never built a single Habitat for Humanity home where we didn't have opposition from neighbors when we came to build the home. This is a for-sale housing product. When I say to you, I think we're part of the problem, I'm sincere. I think we have to take responsibility to say we need housing that's more affordable in our city, and we need to have it in every part of our city. And I will lead that work with you, but we're going to have to do it.
Thank you, Kelly. Mike, you're up.
Thank you. I think one example of this is an effort that I was a part of with many of the folks in this room, which is when we thought about how you approach the challenges of homelessness and affordable housing. That's a very hard coalition to build. And we went about trying to build a coalition to take that on statewide, which was what led to the ballot measure Proposition 123. Jonathan's here from NDC, folks who are here from CCH, all folks that were involved early to say, how do we think about what the problems are here? How do we decide what the most important solutions are here? What's the combination of resources and regulatory change and community-based support? And how can we build a framework that's going to be able to work both in Denver and in Durango and in Elbert? And the harder the issues are, the more you have to stay committed to staying at the table, talking to people about them, because when you give up is when we know that we fail. And so for me, that was successful in terms of bringing together 260 organizations around the state to pass the first ballot measure in Colorado history to take on this problem. Now Denver will have the resources to take on this problem. What we need is now the courage to be able to implement it in our own neighborhoods. And I think when we look at something like homelessness, this does have to be a shared commitment across the city. And we've learned some things from things that have worked and those that haven't. We know it doesn't work always to site one of those in the middle of a heavily residential neighborhood or next to an elementary school. It doesn't mean that every neighborhood can't have a part in being a piece of the solution. And it means we ought to engage them early and we ought to engage them often. But we have to say, this is something we are going to need to do. The choice is not if we're going to do it. The choice is how we're going to do it. So it's not whether or not it's going to exist in this part of the city, it's where it might exist in this part of the city. And you get to have a lot of input on the where, but we can't have one of the possible decisions be whether you decide on the if, because we can't decide if anymore. It has to be a yes, and now it's a how we do that yes.
Thank you both. I mean, clearly, this board is covered in little, dollar signs. So obviously, this is a very important issue for everybody in the room. And I think it's true that we all have to. It's not just about being willing to shove more money at it, right? It's like we need more holistic solutions. Getting real close to the end here. How would you incorporate the arts and artists into city planning? Who are the stakeholders in arts policies, and what steps would you take to support the cultural, creative, and entertainment sectors in Denver? I personally await your answer with bated breath. Mike, you have 2 minutes.
I'm so glad this is the one place that asked me that we built an entire art platform on our website, so you should check out our entire policy plan on art. But I think the overview is we want this to be the best city to be an artist. We want this to be a place where artists come, they stay, they flourish, and they grow a community of other artists that are also attracted to be here. And so one of the things we've come out with is the idea of establishing a residency for artists similar to the one created by Redline, where we would offer an amazing set of artists. You know, you take 24 of the best artists around the region, around the country who want to come to Denver. They would have access to housing. We'd give them housing for 2 years. They'd have access to workspace. They'd have access to partnerships. But most importantly, we give them the city as a canvas. So if you come and write your great one-woman show, we have a chance for you to debut it at the DCPA for 3 nights. If you write the great American novel, we get every public library in the city that's going to have you on the end cap when you walk in. If you have a great piece of visual art you want to generate, we have the side of a building to let you use that canvas as your great mural. We want to be able to bring public art back to life in Denver, and we want to be able to bring artists back to the forefront. And that involves making sure that they can afford to live here, that they have access to space, they have access to materials, and they have access to a canvas. This city is a very big canvas. We want to invite artists to build beautiful things on them.
Thank you, Mike. Kelly, you're up.
Yeah, my mom was a postal carrier and an artist. My parents owned a gallery, Grace Gallery on Santa Fe. My kids worked illegally there before they were supposed to. Don't tell anyone. And I share that with you because I think my mom had 45 artists that we were able to show in the gallery and help expand their opportunities and their future. There's a few things I would do as mayor. One would be make sure we reauthorize SCFD, that we start to address our Tier 3, making sure they're getting enough resources to be able to be successful in our region and they're supported. We know one of the issues, if you just got your assessment and fell out of your chair like I did with your property tax, we know our artists are some of the greatest risks in terms of our businesses who will face the challenge of not being able to stay where they're at today. I would build a fund to make sure we're focused on our smallest of businesses along with people who are residential property owners to ensure you're able to stay in this city and still thrive. But I also want to share with you how I think about art. When I go to a coffee shop and they put that heart on my latte, every single time my heart just jumps and I feel such joy. And I think what we forget is all the places that we can, with real intention, ensure we're incorporating art into our daily lives and increasing people's experience for that joy. Years ago, we had a 5x5 program that every one of our kids in Denver Public Schools would visit 5 of our cultural institutions before they were 5 years old. I would look at things like that we reinstitute, making sure not only our artists can thrive, but everybody's getting the experiences that help build our brains, our lives, how we think and how we see the world. So it's much broader than just our artists.
Thank you both.
It's crazy, by the way. We've had so many of these, and the first time I learned that both you and I had parents that had an art gallery. So there we go. Whole art connection we didn't know.
That's fun. You both like Studio 54 more than Area 51, and
Now
that
we know why.
as well. 2 things in common. Last rapid fire question. So we're going to ask you to list 5. What organizations, community groups, and businesses in Denver do you most admire? What organizations, community groups, and businesses in Denver do you most admire? Although you're just listing 5, so I know that that's tough. And I'll just fill some time as they do that, which I'm sure is very distracting, actually. I've run out of things to say about game shows. I don't know what you all were thinking about when you drove here, but honestly, what I was thinking about when I drove here tonight was, do you remember when Tybo was really big? Like, what happened to that? Does anybody do Tybo anymore? That is honestly what I was thinking, which I think just is a reflection on whether or not I should have been asked to do this. You know, it's like, you wanna ask that person to stand at the mic for a while? I don't know if that's a good idea. I don't know if that was just telling you about my life was enough time. Organizations, community groups, and businesses, which is pretty broad, I guess. What do you like? Yeah, I mean, it's hard to narrow it down, I think. If you feel like you have 5, I'll let you interrupt me, which is probably best. Mike, let's hear them.
I have to just go with the first 5 because it's far too exhaustive of a list of people in every industry. So I think it's part of the conversations from tonight that inspired me. I definitely have Colorado Coalition for the Homeless on this list. I have Servicio de la Raza on this list. I have the Colorado Village Collaborative on this list. Yes. I have Prodigy Coffee on this list. If you have not been there, you should. And I have the Colorado Economic Defense Project on this list. If you all don't know what they do incredible work preventing people from getting evicted in the first place and giving people access to economic opportunity. And the policy director is right here, so you can talk to her afterwards.
Thank you. Kelly, what do you got on your list?
I put Habitat for Humanity, Girls Inc. Cool Beans, which is a fabulous coffee shop. I too did Prodigy Coffee. I think I've had coffee at every coffee shop in the city and county of Denver. And I just want to tell you, I know this shit. Youth on Record, only because I have to give a shout out to Israel, who performed for me at the Chamber, and we got to work together. I'm a big fan. And then I added Clinica, because Girls Inc. and Cool Beans is one. Clinica de Tapia.
Thank you. I mean, it's a little awkward because I told you at the beginning I worked for Buntport Theater and nobody mentioned them. We're at the Sie Film Center.
It was number 6.
Nobody mentioned it.
It was totally number 6.
We're right across the street from a Denver Parks and Rec.
Sorry.
Where I take D2G Soca Fit with Maya, by the way, who's an amazing teacher. So
really,
that's
really,
Wednesdays.
really sorry.
That's okay. You can't mention everything. I get it. I'm sure they were down there. Y'all, we have 2 minutes left of the evening. This is it. Closing remarks. You each have 1 minute to just kind of pitch to our audience why you deserve their vote. I almost said that the wrong way. I almost said it the opposite. So you have 1 minute to convince them. Here we go. Mike, you are up first.
Thank you all so much for being here and for taking the time to participate in this and making it by far the most fun event we've had so far. So really well done. I think that for me, one of the things that makes me unique is about the experiences I've had in the city. I got to start my career as a teacher and a school principal, spent the time supporting young people and trying to get access to opportunity. I got the chance to be in policy as a state senator and work on taking on some of the city's hardest problems. We worked on finally getting undocumented kids access to college and in-state tuition so they could all pursue the American dream. We worked on taking on the NRA twice on gun safety and making sure we got universal background checks and banned high-capacity magazines. We were able to build broad coalitions to take on things like finally delivering universal preschool statewide and finally being able to deliver affordable housing and homeless services statewide through Prop 123. Each of these require the tenacity to take on one of the city's hardest problems, to build really broad and diverse coalitions, and to be able to make sure that we deliver historic results. That's what I think the next mayor is going to need to be able to do, and I'd be honored to be able to do that with you. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Mike. Final pitch, Kelly.
I guess what I would say is every single thing I have in my life, every opportunity I've been given was because I chose this city to live in. And my family has had real struggles. I lost my father to violent crime. My family received government assistance when I was a kid. My husband struggled with an addiction our entire life, and my girls and I lost him to suicide. And I look around this city, and what I see are people struggling with many of the same issues my family has struggled with. And I know my experience working for the city, I can support Denver residents who are struggling today, that I can find that path, that the city I came to where I saw opportunity, where I got support from the community to help my family navigate great losses, where I got to experience arts and culture with my kids in the great outdoors, which I think here is second to none, where I could build a business and build a family, is the same city I think we're capable of delivering for every single person in our city today. And I would love to have your support to be able to build that city so you can see that opportunity and someday sit up here and tell everyone, please vote for me, because I'm going to keep this city going.
Thank you. Applause for both of them. Thank you all for giving your time up tonight. We appreciate it. Do you have some final remarks, Jamie? Here we go.
All right, thank you. Let's give it up one more time for our candidates. Thank you both so much for taking the time. Give it up for yourselves. You really caught on to those flags. And I think that we should just keep using those every time we're out as a new Denver trend. You're at a bar, somebody says something you don't like, red flag. I want to thank the Palooza Planning Committee. If you were on that, will you raise your hand? Did these people not come up with some of the most engaging and interesting and honest questions? So big thanks to everybody who put this together. Thank you all for just bringing the humanity, and there is nobody better to make all of us feel comfortable, to laugh, to enjoy our time together than this person right here. Is she amazing? You see why I want her for every event. Couple really important reminders. When you leave today, remember we're in a political race, and we're on the same team in a lot of ways. So when we're out there, let's try to be as kind and thoughtful and as informed as possible, because I think that's one of the best attributes of our city is our kindness. And so let's remember that as we leave. Number 2, we're going to remember to vote. And what is Election Day? January 6th. That's the last day. June? He said January, and then I got confused, and now none of us are voting on time. Oh, my Lord. June 6th, all of you watching, June 6th. So we have a June 6th election. I know all of you here are going to vote. I know all of you watching online are going to vote, but maybe you've got a couple friends who aren't. Show them this live stream. Talk to them about why you're voting. Let's get more people voting. And most importantly, when you leave, return your flags. Thanks so much for coming to Mayorpalooza.